Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the township's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the Township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the Township's website. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Of the East Lampeter Township Planning Commission present this evening for the meeting. Jerry Huskin from the Planning Commission, Randy Patterson, Jason Dagan, Colin Seasholtz, Director of Planning, Alicia Hare, Administrative Assistant, and David Sinopoli, Planning. Absent this evening is Sarah Ryder, I believe, and we don't have anybody Zoomed. Well, we have one. John Schick is one person zoomed in. So start the meeting. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is approval of the minutes of the February 8th Planning Commission meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes, having read it?
On new business, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line down, I think there's something missing after the word along. I think there's a street missing. It just says, we'll close the access from Lincoln Highway East and reconfigure access along. And it goes on to say working with and waiting.
That should be Tennyson, I believe. Be Tennyson Drive.
With that correction.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
I have a couple items. We start at the top. The meeting was February 8th, not the 9th. In the header and then also in the first, second line, it's the 8th and not the 9th. And the minutes that we approved that meeting was January 11th, not the 7th. Okay. And then down in new business, under A, the third line, I think there was just some confusion. I believe the 5 self-service bays and 1 drive-through is what it used to be. With the new plan, it'll be 3 self-serve bays and 3 drive-throughs. It'll be 3 and 3 instead of 5 and 1. And then in the last paragraph, and Randy, you can tell me if I'm correct here, on the motion that you made.
Yes.
With the approval of Plan 2021 Lincoln Highway East to include items addressed in the Dave Miller letter. There were 13 items in that letter. 1 through 9 were waiver and modifications, and there was 1 through 4 were subdivision. I'm suggesting we eliminate number 1 through 7. You just say items addressed in the Dave Miller. I think you included in both.
Yeah.
The entire letter. And then after the January 27th date of 2022, we also included the review letter from Lancaster County dated November 1st, 2021. We can include those items. Those are my items. If there's nothing further to discuss, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes of February 8th as just revised.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Ayes have it. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is old business. None at this time. Next would be new business. We have the Plan 2021-25, the Sprudler Real Estate Final Land Development for 2599 Old Philly Pike. We have somebody present. And if, yeah, and I believe we have a mic. Okay. And if, yeah, if you would please, yeah, hook it up and turn it on, since we are recording the meeting.
Yep. Should I see a light? Yeah, no. It's on.
It's on. It's on.
On the top next to,
It's on
the
the,
side.
it's under your hand. Yeah, I just don't see
Yeah.
a light.
All right, good
you look
evening,
on the side as well.
yep, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Matt Cream, and I'm counsel for the project. With me this evening is Nate Pipitone. He's project manager for the owner. Kevin Ember from Ratu Associates is the land planner. And on Zoom is John Schick, the traffic consultant. John, you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thanks. John wasn't sure if he felt well enough to come out in public, so we have him available to you on Zoom. So members of the Planning Commission, this property on Old Philadelphia Pike has two existing operating light industrial uses in the two buildings A and B as shown on the plan as existing. The infill development of the site proposes three buildings marked 1, 2, and the large building to the back as 3. We've been through traffic planning with PennDOT and several reviews and revisions of the plan with township staff. The review letter that you have from Scott Payne really distills the issues down to just a few, and in fact, I would say one. Otherwise, the plan is agreeable and compliant with township ordinances. That one issue comes down to sidewalks, and we'll get into that after Kevin takes you through a description of the plan. So at this point, I would ask Kevin to do that with you.
Thanks, Matt. So as mentioned, it's kind of an infill project here where there's two existing buildings. Total square footage of those is about 65,000 square feet. And there's 3 new buildings proposed that would have a total square footage of about 86,000 square feet. mentioned, we have gone through the PennDOT traffic study process and do have that conditionally approved on the township's approval of that. There is sidewalk and curbing proposed along the frontage of Old Philadelphia Pike as required by the township. There's also 2 entrances that will access into the site kind of on either side of the existing building. As of right now, there's some additional openings along Old Philadelphia Pike, which will be closed off with additional curbing. The property is on the public sewer, so we're proposing a lateral system that'll connect into the public sewer within Old Philadelphia Pike and a new well for the on-lot water to serve the proposed buildings. As far as stormwater, there's an existing basin. You can see to the left of the 46,000 square foot building to the rear that's proposed to be expanded to handle most of our stormwater control. And then also the existing creek that runs along the western property boundary, we will be maintaining and improving some of the riparian buffer that goes along that area to meet some of the DEP stormwater volume requirements. And as for parking, we have provided some parking for each of the new buildings, along with trying to preserve to the extent possible the existing parking lot out in front of the existing building, what we're calling Building A. And I think that leads into some of the points of discussion that Matt had mentioned regarding the right of way and sidewalk along the frontage.
Describe will frontage improvement proposed for road and access that we've gone through with PennDOT, and then we'll roll into sidewalks and other improvements in that area.
Sure. So in discussions with PennDOT, there was no turning lane required based on the square footage of the proposed buildings on site, though we are providing some widening of the existing cartway. So from center line of the existing street to the proposed curb is roughly 18 to 18 and a half feet along the frontage. That would include the lane and a shoulder wide enough to accommodate buggy traffic, which was a concern in this area. Obviously, the curb and sidewalk is being proposed as a requirement of the township from a previous deferral from this land development that I believe was in the 1990s. So that is being proposed at this time. DOT has not required at this point any extension of or expansion of the existing right of way, which is 25 foot from center line. And that is one of the waivers requested regarding the township right of way requirement to maintain that existing right of way at 25 feet.
What changes or improvements to the accesses are proposed?
Yeah, as mentioned, those will be fully curbed. We've looked at truck turning into and out of both entrances to accommodate that and stay within the lane as meeting PennDOT requirements. So there'll be rather wide radiuses there to accommodate potential truck traffic, although at the existing site and with the proposed buildings, there's not extensive truck traffic expected for this site.
And in order to avoid conflict with the driveway, particularly the one on the western side, we've redesigned the loading area, correct?
Yeah, if you can see it on the bottom left corner of building A, there was an existing dock which larger trucks would back up and potentially be maneuvering within the old Philadelphia Pike right away. So at the township's request, we have reversed that. So that side will now be a ramp for smaller delivery vehicles that will not be encroaching into the right of way, and then larger trucks would pull in and back in adjacent to the building the other way.
And as you said, back in the 90s, there was a plan processed for this site where sidewalks and curbs were deferred.
Correct.
And this plan shows sidewalks and curbs being provided, but in such a way that I think it's 3 waivers of design and location have been requested.
Yeah, because of the 25-foot existing right of way, and as mentioned, trying to preserve the existing parking lot. There's a couple waivers related to the sidewalk location and some minor landscape locations.
And that existing parking lot is the parking lot that is between the front of Building A and the old Philadelphia Pike.
Correct. Yep.
Describe the sidewalk that is being proposed by the plan as submitted.
Yeah, so we're proposing a 5-foot wide sidewalk, about a 2-foot flexible grass strip between the curb and the sidewalk. And in some cases, we're proposing that sidewalk outside the right of way within an access easement to be able to provide the sidewalk at the required width, try to maintain as many of the existing utility poles along the frontage without relocation and maintaining the existing right of way.
With the waivers as requested. If the waivers as requested are not granted, the 24 parking places closest to the old Philadelphia Pike would have to be eliminated, correct?
Right.
All of the utility poles would have to be relocated, correct?
Right.
And we would need to provide at least an additional 5 feet of right of way in order for the sidewalks, the curbs, and the grass strip to be provided in compliance with the ordinance.
Correct. The ordinance requirement is 1 foot inside the right of way for the sidewalk and at least a 2-foot grass strip between the curb and sidewalk.
It took me a while to figure that out because it needs to be within the right of way, but 1 foot from the right of way. That means 1 foot inside the right of way.
Correct.
I was thinking 1 foot on the other side of the right of way, but then you couldn't have the sidewalk inside.
Right.
So that 1 foot plus the sidewalk, plus the grass strip, plus the curb would require the additional 5 feet of right of way. And that eliminates 24 parking places.
Right.
And I believe you said that in the design as proposed, the intent was to preserve the operations of buildings A and B with its existing parking, and then providing parking for each of the new buildings so that they could each operate with parking associated with them, correct?
Yeah, that was the intent. As at this time, there's not any certain tenants. So we were trying to provide parking for each individual proposed building separate from the existing parking.
There's currently no existing sidewalks along the old Philadelphia Pike for a distance in either direction for a distance, correct?
Right. There's nothing directly adjacent on either east or west, and I don't believe further down there is either.
there's sidewalk within the residential development of Enterprise Drive, but doesn't extend beyond its
Right,
intersection.
right.
Members of the Planning Commission, I'm sure you're familiar with the area. It's a well-traveled roadway, but I think we put off some photographs that starts just west of the intersection of 6. Takes you along the old Philadelphia to the property, which begins on the 3rd page, the entirety of the property on the 4th page, and then you see the intersection of Enterprise Drive on the east end of the 4th page, and then I zoom in a bit and took a photograph of the Enterprise Drive intersection. Kevin, working from the 4th page, which shows our buildings A and B, and the intersection of Enterprise Drive, correct?
Yes.
And showing the extent of the sidewalk as exists. Is there any impediment if the opportunity presents that would obviously prevent in any way the connection of the existing sidewalk there at Enterprise Drive to what is proposed by the applicant with the waivers on the Stubler property?
No, I don't believe so.
Again, perhaps some nominal waivers might be necessary from the strict terms of the ordinance, but a sidewalk could be connected.
Yeah,
And I guess the same question, if an opportunity presents to extend it to the west along the Old Philadelphia Pike in the direction of 896, same thing.
right. Yeah, it would be in alignment with any future sidewalk there.
And if we continue west on Old Philadelphia Pike to 896, if there's ever an opportunity to put sidewalks in there along Old Philadelphia Pike through Mill Creek Road and into Smoketown, waivers are probably going to be required, or else buildings or homes are going to be.
Yeah, it looks that way.
In your opinion, is there any safety hazard connected with the sidewalks as designed with the waiver request?
I don't believe so, since we are providing curbing, a wide shoulder there, and still providing that grass strip between the sidewalk and curb. There should be no issues.
So everything required or less is being provided, but not in the strict location or the strict requirements.
Correct.
Members of the Planning Commission, I'm sure you have some questions. But to state the obvious, we're asking to make a judgment on this plan, on coming down to the sole issue of sidewalks, curbs, and their locations, of way strict compliance with the ordinance against substantial disruption of a property that has been existing will be the subject of significant improvements over what exists today, with a near miss on the ordinance requirements. On the one hand, the only thing we get is strict compliance with the ordinance. On the other hand, we suggest we get improved plan. I've been doing this a long time. It's a long time. Near compliance with the ordinance does not always equal to plan. That's why waivers exist. Waivers exist to provide a comparable result, but strict compliance isn't necessary. This comment only showed up in the last reading. Placing the sidewalks within an easement is the functional equivalent of dedicating the right of way. It's, in many cases, the right of way is an easement. And I don't know why it's a common issue. So Kevin's available, John Schick on Zoom if you have any specific traffic questions. Otherwise, this is a fairly straightforward plan.
Thank you for that presentation. Just to maybe simplify that, you are currently proposing sidewalks along the entire frontage of the property. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And you're also proposing curbing along the entire frontage. So this last presentation that you have made is in response to our engineer's comment of possibly moving those things. But you do have sidewalks and curbing proposed
Correct. Yeah.
along Old Philly Pike for the entire frontage. Okay. So we're all kind of on the same page. So the question is really where the curbing won't change potentially, but the sidewalk placement may. So we have a Randy, question.
Couple of, like, if I, Matt, if I, Mr. Cream. So you used the term disruption by removing those 20 spaces. Could you explain what that disruption is? For the
So currently, those 4 spaces as they exist serve the existing buildings. If they're going to be moved, the only place that parking can be replaced is behind those buildings. So it separates the parking from the buildings that they serve. One of the things that I've learned from the traffic engineers over the years, that there's a concept in designing parking lots called SAP, S-A-P, see, approach, park. That the safest parking lots, the most effective and the most useful parking lots are the parking lots that from the right of way, you can see where it is, you can see how to get there, and you can see how to park there. So we have an established use there that removing those parking spaces will disrupt that. And we're going to need wayfinding signs. We're going to need to tell people coming to that business where they can find the parking if it is there. And that's an additional uncertainty for traffic turning in from the old Philadelphia Pike.
In reference to the parking, not numbers, but percentage wise, how much is for employees for those multiple businesses as opposed to visitors coming there occasionally or once every so often? Because that's the parking you were
right,
saying.
I think
is more
over,
for a
right,
Customer.
customer and
Right.
a parking lot that
Right.
serve multiple business where they come and go. So I understand that, but this, I think the majority of parking is more for employees.
Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we discussed is that the parking is of the existing and proposed parking, 25% is above what's necessary for the employees.
Right. We went a little above and beyond the parking requirement for the ordinance to propose one space per employee plus an additional 25% for, that fluctuation or other visitors.
So on average, 1 in 5 parking places is for visitors, customers, delivery people, salespeople, that sort of thing.
So in your letter related to the parking, you made the comment that having some additional parking spaces allows for flexibility of the future use of the site. Future use being additional building at some point in time in the future, or future use with these buildings that are being built.
So future use in these buildings. So these buildings have been designed in such a way that a prospective user, particularly 1 and 2, could take the entire building, or they could be subdivided into smaller maker places. From the beginning, we discussed with the township the need that the township perceived for smaller manufacturer, assembler, light industrial users as perhaps the first step off of a farm for an on-farm business or out of a residential property for a home occupation. Again, the concept being you begin on farm or home occupation, and then as you grow, you move to a compliant site for the commercial or industrial use. That's what this was viewed as. So the result of that is there's a little uncertainty about the marketplaces for occupancy. So that flexibility was built in to address the uncertainty.
So in the review letter, your request on the parking from a zoning perspective also exceeds the 105% threshold, seeking a what's the percentage increase that you're seeking?
It's
250. Can you just explain why you believe you need that much additional parking?
Well, the existing ordinance requirement was 1 space per 2 employees on the largest shift, which we believe was a little low for this type of scenario. Now, obviously, as Matt said, proposed new buildings don't have users yet. If it ends up being a plain sec, then maybe not as many car spaces would be required. But we were trying to at least maintain most of those existing parking spaces out front for the existing buildings, because really, if you look at requirement, just what they have with existing parking on site with the existing buildings, they're already over 125% without any of the proposed buildings. So we're just trying to kind of still provide enough spaces for the proposed buildings to allow for those uses to occur and keep proximity and parking in close proximity to building A.
So the other waiver you're asking for is those street trees as a result of not being able, not wishing to move the sidewalk back. Was there any conversation about still doing street trees?
Yeah, so we are still proposing street trees in front of the other areas of the frontage. It would really just be in front of that existing parking along Building A. And then we were proposing to provide what would be required there elsewhere throughout the site, just not necessarily right along that street frontage to allow for the sidewalk.
I guess my question is a little bit different. Could you put, I won't call them street trees, I'll call them property trees. Matt, now you know where I'm going with this. On the property along the sidewalk. It might mean losing 2 or 3 spaces, not
So-
24 spaces.
Within additional islands, you mean that would be?
Yeah, but you're still planting trees along the street, along the roadway.
Right.
But they may be on private property, which the township would still need an easement.
Yeah, yeah,
Someone
but
would
the
still
corners,
need
but
an easement to access.
So there are 2 on either end. This doesn't show. it.
No,
But
that's what I'm asking.
There's one here and one here. And you're suggesting that,
I'm suggesting potentially meeting the ordinance requirement of street trees, but having them planted along
okay.
the property.
So bring that closer so Randy can see what is being proposed. We are,
I can, just for my colleagues here.
yeah.
So
We'll pass it along. Go ahead.
in the city of Lancaster, you have to have trees along the parking lot and you have to have street trees. And in some places you have these trees on the street and then the parking lot is up against the sidewalk and you have trees on the parking lot. And the city has allowed the property owner to plant the public tree on the parking lot. But the city still gets access to that tree to maintain that tree if it needs to be maintained for whatever reason. Whether PennDOT needs to come online to maintain it for some reason because of the branching overhangs and that kind of thing. Right, repair shatters, yeah. It's a methodology of getting your street trees and providing that beautification and heat and stormwater and everything else, but perhaps not requiring them to lose 24 spaces, but you still get your sidewalk, you still get your street trees. Just
Existing in front of Building A and the parking in front of Building A, between that parking and Old Toy Pike, there are currently plantings there. A couple, 3 larger trees and some smaller, if I remember correctly, 10-foot height or so. What, are those all being removed to put the sidewalk in, or is any of that being changed? Because it is existing now.
Right.
And it's established, and it's hard to tell today or this time of year how healthy they are, but we'll know in a month or 2.
You're correct. There's some understory
Yeah.
shrubs there.
There's along here,
Yeah,
especially shrubbery, right?
Yeah, for the most part, it's more shrub level, 3 to 4 feet. But there's a couple of smaller fruit trees, I believe. But yeah, because of the increase in the pavement widening and adding the curb and sidewalk, and not wanting street trees within their right away there, that is going to be proposed to be.
Just suggesting is so you have in front of building 1 or building A. Could you put 4 trees in front of building A? So you're going to lose a parking space on both sides, But if you have another one, then you have the sign, then you have the tree, and then you have the tree again. You're providing some additional trees. You're losing maybe 4 parking spaces.
I think as long as that. Still make the parking with the. Two additional trees. How many utility poles going across?
You need this? Sure, you can take that back.
Well, it's, about 6. I think we're proposing to accommodate the improvements there, relocating about 3 or 4 hours.
They're currently in front of building A. Or they're where you're trying to build new.
Yeah, so some of the relocated ones are at where we're providing new driveways with the curb to accommodate that wider turning radius. So yeah, I believe it's 3 that would be proposed to be removed on the frontage. Relocated. So, 6 or 7 on that total.
Do you know how much it would offset the line of the sidewalk from the end of your property to Enterprise Road? Sidewalk. How much is there of an offset from where the Enterprise Road sidewalk comes out to where your sidewalk would?
You can't scale from. I tried to run a line.
Right. We have this whole kind of like,
Really no way of.
It's not substantial. Is it?
It is not
A
substantial.
foot,
I-
maybe
it-
2 feet, you'd have to
the-
kind of.
The cartway is no wider there than it is in front of the property. The only place the cartway is wider is at the 6 intersection. So
that's the parking between the existing, what's between existing building A and B? Those buildings aren't connected, so there's,
yeah, it's kind of an overhang area off the rear of A and the front of B. And then it's just kind of a drive-through area there to access. There isn't sufficient room for parking and a compliant aisle.
you obviously anticipated where I was going.
Right.
Yeah, as parking potentially, appropriate back there
So,
for
can you scale that?
employees. It wouldn't be for public, but for employees, which would open up. Because then I get by here pretty often, and that front lot is full. Last I was through, I think it was Friday, 12 to somewhere between 12 and 2, and there weren't but a couple open spaces. So it seems you need the parking now, but we are adding a lot. You are proposing to add a lot more parking. So
I mean, it would be roughly, I think, about 40 feet, and that's the full length.
would it be potential to do an angled diagonal parking, which takes up less depth, and make it a one-way that you would come in the eastern entrance and have it a one-way through there for the drive, and then it would not, so the employee could pull in and then back out and go from east to west and exit at the western ingress egress on the property, which gives you, you don't need as much width, but well, you know where I'm going. You
Yeah,
could have a narrower or not as deep a space. You wouldn't need 20 feet. You could get
Right. I can't say offhand without having a little better understanding of how they use that area. There is several doors back there, and I know they're, taking materials back and forth in some of that area and storing some materials back there now. Um, Yes,
Pedestrian people door or a garage auto?
I believe there's both. And then there's also some stairs and stuff that stick out in certain areas to get up to level ground.
I was an employee and there was parking on the side of A. I'd be parking there in the summer in the shade and I come out, my car, it's not so hot. You'd be on the north side of the building and in the shade of it, so.
Right.
It'd be a prime spot for the early arrivals.
There's an overhang off both buildings there. Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy to see on the aerial.
Yeah, as you've read the letter, a lot of the comments in the Dave Eller review letter relate to what's done with those 24 parking spaces. And depending on that decision, that dictates the direction on sidewalks and trees and et cetera. So
The letter justifies, attempts to justify a denial of the based on there being enough total spaces on the property. It doesn't value the spaces, it doesn't analyze their usefulness, their location, etc. Just there is not enough parking someplace else, so these spaces are expendable, and that ignores the current function.
yeah, and it's, I mean, the existing parking, the majority of it is in the front of A. I don't know. Where the employees work, if they work in A more so than B. If they're in B, they've got a hike back to B. There's not many parking spaces back in B. From seeing the site, a lot of that are company-owned trucks and equipment in the back in that area. And there are very few cars back there. It's more the employee parking is all in the front.
Well, the additional B will from the existing part. That part
The parking is all back to building 3, which is really not much closer than what's the existing is. Well, that's existing.
It is existing, sorry.
Yeah, this is existing.
Those are existing.
9 existing spaces. Yeah.
All right.
So the new is back on the east and west side of building 3, or excuse me, building 2. That's the new parking I see is on the east and west side of building 2. There's some new parking in the front of building 1 and then parking in front of building 3. And of course, new parking. Well, just continuing, there was, with the new parking, I noticed there are a proposed bike rack in front of building 1. Are there any other proposed bicycle racks in regards to the existing buildings and the other buildings, 2, 3.
Yeah, we were showing one, and this was for a comment from the county planning commission. We
Yeah.
added a bike rack in the front of building 1, and there's also one just to the right of building 3 in the corner. And we figured those are kind of in between the existing and proposed buildings, could potentially be used by both, providing that crosswalk connection to connect to the existing sidewalk as well there.
As you see, we have the small plan. After a while, the eyes.
Yeah, no,
I thought there might be
totally
more, but
understand.
I wasn't, so thank you. That's why I was asking. Well, and it's 2-part. And we indicated you aren't sure who the new occupiers of these buildings may be. So bicycle parking and buggy parking, so may be a necessity for the employees. I didn't observe any buggy parking, and that's a different, a different type of paving. Oh, here, okay.
Right, yeah. So we showed some in the back by building 2, and again, not knowing the uses, potentially that could, if building 1 or 3 would be more conducive to that, that could potentially, shift some parking spaces depending what the end uses are.
With the buggy, I don't have a buggy, but now it's a covered area, especially if they're working during the day and have their horse with them, so that they can get home at the end of the day. The horse is still able to carry them.
Those are all features that are not necessarily features
Well, yes.
that could be added as the need arises.
Yeah.
Additional bike racks or okay, and buggy parking.
Yeah. And part of that is either a covered area or appropriate canopy trees. So it could be part of the landscape plan as well. It could be worked in easily now to accommodate provision of shade in the future. Yeah. Kind of measure twice, cut once. So the plan is the plan. And the plan, if you have to work with, you don't have to guess where to put it. You'll have it laid out for you. And you mentioned, I guess, not a lot of trailers. There's a lot of combination dump truck and tow behind trailers, especially I think with Mill Creek, the one and the larger that they have. So your turning radiuses are critical, not just with Old Philly Pike, but within the site. And it appears you may have that. I doubt that they will be going around the back of building 2 unless they're lost. But that might be a little tough to swing that corner. But I saw you had a bollard on the corner so that they don't take the building, but they may take the side of that.
That was one of the things that Kevin mentioned. We had a challenge on the rest of access, which is why we flipped the approach on the dock for the large. Because originally we had the larger vehicles approaching the dock on the Old Philadelphia Pike frontage. They now approach the dock from inside the city.
Yeah, and we did look at the rear building 2 there and discuss that with the fire department, and they were okay with we showed a little wider width there in the back at 35 feet, just to make sure we could get, a larger truck behind there. Building 2.
Building
Yeah.
2 on the north side. So we're not there yet, but in the motion, just my personal with the sidewalk is you have to have the sidewalk personally. Though on either side it's not connected, but there is, as you showed us, from Enterprise out, there is a gap now to the east. To the west, your neighbor to the west, Ames Reese, had been in a little while ago with a plan, and sidewalks would be an issue. Now they're on hold right now. You may or may not know, but with any improvements, but the climate changes, they may be back in. That sidewalk will be pretty tall. A little further to the east to the new township park, which is under plan. You know, the land had been purchased just before the mill. And so it would be excellent to have a sidewalk from the park to the east, down to the residential area, down towards the fire company, and connect all that so people could be off of the street, out of the shoulder buggy lane, and a place they could walk. So when they come into the park, they could do some walking. So it's, and though you mentioned in the 90s there were a waiver, but there's a much greater interest and emphasis on multimodal transportation.
Which is why we made it clear that we would not be asking for that referral to the state. They grant this comment.
I think there will be a bit of a pinch point there where that tributary to Mill Creek crosses. Obviously, that would be difficult to have the sidewalk if it would be a 50-foot right at that point. Probably wouldn't make sense.
Well, it may or may not be an issue at the moment because the township does own land on either side of the creek. So there potentially could be a bridge within the park across the creek, or that's not all planned yet, but so you could walk through the park, cross over, and yeah, there's a bunch of options that kind of work it all together. Yes.
Again, the plan is on existing conditions. Might not be this, but it makes sense.
How many employees are on that? Do you know how many employees work in the existing buildings today?
Yeah, for existing buildings, we were accounting for 60 total. Assuming 24 total within. Yes.
So out of the 77 spaces you have on site today, 60 of those are being used. 360 employees.
One shift, two shifts, what's the work schedule for the current? So they run one shift. Two shifts. Well, and I'm talking more from the other side of the table now, but you have two shifts and they overlap depending on if you're running equipment or things. You get the next shift in before the current shift leaves. So it does dictate a little higher need of parking as the new ones are coming in before the current ones leave. So it does dictate making your argument maybe for more than 125%, but it's all a consideration for us, as you say, with planning and you know, what makes it work. So, and with not having the new tenants, I don't know what they may require.
Those are all the new employees, tenants are all forecasted.
So there's no commitment or anything that's been made so far. You build it, they will come.
And then, as I pointed out, our very first conversation with the township told us that they're here trying to protect somebody who hasn't apartment this. Who take promotion for some smallish major spaces are not proximity. existing on parking. So, we're hopeful that that is the population of this expansion.
I may go a little backwards here. Normally we do the review letter and then we do the county and others. But we've talked about a lot of the issues in the Dave Miller letter. We'll let some think here. But we do have the county letter from September 21st. And maybe make that simple. There were 3 comments. First was in regards to bicycle parking. We talked with, you have no issue in coming in compliance with that. And the other was just a matter of the notation on the plan. So just from this side, you have no issue in coming in compliance with those comments in their letter. And then we also had one on the, which is, I think, included in Dave Miller's in regards to the sewer authority and compliance. And there were several issues in there. Don't see an issue with any of those comments.
We haven't addressed those, but we're waiting to.
And then we have the February 25th letter from Dave Miller and Associates, which we talked about, I believe, most of those issues. All right. On this side of the table, are there any comments in regards? Well, the first is preliminary plan. Not being filed and asking a waiver be granted to go to final plan. So I don't know if there's any concern on this side that that be granted. Second item, or reference to the sidewalks. Along the public street, and we are providing. The question is a location. We have done. The township is not opposed to having a sidewalk outside of the existing or the designated right of way with an easement, and then it's 6 and 1 and a half and does the other, whether it's right of way easement it is. Allows for that. And sometimes that's more efficient for the property to have it there. And that is, I think, a recommendation at times, and the landowners sometimes have requested that. A little more efficient in their development. So it's a two-way street there. So it's not a question of whether we do sidewalks. I think the question is where they are. And that comes down to the existing 24 parking spaces. Recommendation here is to deny that. That discussion relative to keeping most of those 24 spaces, maybe losing 4 of them, add an additional 2 more trees between the 2 at the eastern and western end of the, that are currently proposed, as I understand, at the eastern western end of that parking, and then adding 2 more in between, which would probably have more parking space. Left with 20. One consideration
That's an acceptable condition.
that we have here. So that's, and then item 3 is again, sidewalks along the street and within the parking compound. We've not really spoke to that this evening. In some places, whether it's adjacent to parking or not adjacent to parking, 5-foot width or 6-foot width. If it's immediately adjacent to the parking because of the car overhang and blocking a couple, 3 feet of it. Believe you were putting bullfrogs or the car stops in some cases
Right, so that was,
to prevent that over the 5 foot.
yeah, that was related specifically along the sidewalk, along the frontage, along the existing parking, and then also along building two because of how the parking is laid out, kind of parallel to the building. It's really easy to access. They're similar to the existing building.
So in the front, you're proposing 5 feet and not 6.
Correct, yeah.
And then you would have a wheel stop to prevent the sidewalk from being obstructed. And I'm not reading it again.
Yeah, we're proposing your curb stop.
That's illustrated on the. Any other comments on screen? And
The list is going to be sufficient.
if they're properly placed. I mean, if you put it right up against the curb, no. If you put it a foot or forget the exact dimension.
That was.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you, I don't know if it's dimension here. If it is, I can read it. But they're placed generally at least 1.5 or maybe 2 feet from it. Cars don't have a big overhang as they used to. The challenge you still have today is to pick up with the trailer hitch that sticks out a foot beyond the front door. They have a greater overhang. But if they're properly placed, it should not obstruct the sidewalk. The wheel stops in place. Any other? No?
You said PennDOT's okay to 25-foot.
At this time.
Yeah, for that, yeah, street trees was 4 and yeah, and then the right of way width is 5. Yeah. And the street trees we talked about as far as 24. And curbs, you have a mix of curbing and no curbing. And the only condition recommended here is that the landscape islands are curved. And that would be item 6. And zoning, that will gladly let you work with Colin. He's also, Planning Commission doesn't have any authority on the zoning issue. With Colin and if necessary, zoning hearing, but I think Colin will take care of that. The one comment is there. And that's the hard part of the party. And subdivision land development or 4 comments, evidence of approval of sanitary sewer, which we have a separate letter to comment, and you said you can comply with that. You'll obviously need that before. DEP planning module. Item 2, financial security. Need to provide on the township's approval. Item 4 is the parks and open space, and that'll be a discussion. I'm sure you have I'm guessing you have a proposal on how you'll address the parks park and open space. Either providing land or. And then last is stormwater. Stormwater.
We believe we can resolve that.
Okay. We'll let the engineers know 3 or 4 more pages of charts and numbers and volume and peak rates of the water. So any other thoughts? Questions? So, if nothing further. I'll look for a motion in reference to our discussion.
I'll make a motion to get it on the table and see where it goes from there. Regarding land development plan number 2021-25, Stuler Real Estate Final Land Development Plan for 2599 Old Philadelphia Pike. Recommend to the Board of Supervisors the approval of the plan as submitted, and with regard to waivers and modifications requested, the modification for preliminary plan submission to be granted, that waiver to be granted. Regarding the request to portions of the sidewalk to be up to 3 feet outside of the right of way and providing access easements over the areas outside of the right of way be approved. That the request for modification of the 6-foot sidewalk requirement and accepting a 5-foot wide sidewalk in the area of the existing parking lot and the existing right of way, as well as seeking relief of the requirement related to a proposed 5-foot sidewalk along the proposed parking compounds and access drive granted. That the waiver of street trees not be granted in the way it's worded in the David Miller letter, but that the applicant would agree, in addition to the street trees in the existing land development plan that's been submitted, plant 2 additional trees in front of building A in the existing parking lot, equal distance from the 2 new trees that would be planted. That the waiver requested for the 50-foot right-of-way width be granted, assuming PennDOT approval, and that the applicant's request for a waiver of curbing along all the new parking compounds be granted with the condition that all required landscape islands are curbed, that all other issues related to zoning, subdivision, and land development and stormwater management outlined in the February 25th, 2022 letter of David Miller Associates be complied with, that the applicant be able to comply with HRG's letter of February 2nd, 2022 regarding the East Lampeter Township Sewer Authority requirements and the comments from the Lancaster County Planning Department related to bicycle parking and notations on the plan be accommodated. That's it.
So we have a motion. Have a second for that motion. And a second. Any discussion?
I just, from a discussion standpoint, just to give a little reasoning for the motion. The applicant is doing curb, they are doing sidewalk, they are planting trees. The existing parking, while they could be, 24 spaces could be removed to allow for 6 foot of sidewalk. We have approved 5 feet of sidewalk at other locations. And based on the current number of employees and customers coming to the site and the potential unknown number of employees for the 2-3 new buildings, I think to lose those 24 spaces, and in my opinion, looking at the site, and I've been out there, I don't see other locations to create new parking spaces. That's why I suggested or moved for the granting of a waiver request.
We covered a lot. And 2 items I forgot on my part. The existing landscaping, the evergreens that are along the eastern boundary are on this property. And if you could take a look at those, there may be a gap here and there that may be good to include a replacement planting. To complete the screen that's there. It's a fairly thin screen, but there's a couple spots, I believe, that have some either death or loss, or that could be added to the landscape plan. Since you're putting a new building back there, putting parking there, headlights shining to the east, and that's the backyards of some residential properties. So. Yeah, and the retaining wall, you're putting a retaining wall on there, is the parking lower than the property to the east, or is, I wasn't sure which way, you don't have a grading plan, but. Yeah, but there is on 2. Yeah. But yeah, it's keep your neighbors happy. And the final one, on the southwest corner of the property, I think you're missing a pole. Where in that proposed curb taper, just above that, I think there's a pole very close to where that new drive is put in. You may want to take a look and see if another pole needs to be relocated. Because there's some right on the property line, but I think there's another pole in there that I saw on the site that may have got missed, because you do have several poles along there. I'm not proposing those as part of the motion. You can take care of those. And unless Randy would like to include the landscape screen along the.
Yeah, we have to repeat it all.
Yeah, no.
Have a commitment to do that. We'll be watching.
So. We have the motion and the second. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none, abstaining. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
I also thank David Miller's associates for the rationale that they provided. It helped me work through that. I was just telling staff to make sure David Miller understands. I appreciated their analysis.
On this side of the table for the next, I think we should look at the zoning. This light industrial property is adjacent to the village residential. And generally between light industrial and residential, we have a 25-foot buffer. Here it's only 15. That's compliant, but I think for your notes of potential zoning updates, I think we need to look at, because think that may have just been missed, but I think any light industrial adjacent to a village residential. And this may qualify like an R1 kind of area, but it's village residential. It probably should be more than 15. But it's yeah. I know we used to keep a list of things that pop up. Yeah.
I have that. Number three, the waiver one of the not enough. And number four, not handled for that. Yeah, I don't, or not building A. I don't know how to word that because it's not denying their waiver request was not to plant any additional trees. So in a sense, we did deny that waiver request, but the offset was to plant 2 additional trees in front of building A. Number 2 was correct. Correct.
Moving on, next item of business is the Westland Peter Township revised comprehensive plan.
That's why it was,
So you gave it tonight, right? So we've got the memo this evening.
I did note too that it was mentioned, but I didn't see much other than mentioning the Bridgeport crossroads. So I think making a little bit, providing a little bit more emphasis to that in the plan would be beneficial.
Do you know if they had, for want of another word, adopted the Bridgeport Transportation Land Use Plan? If Westland Peter had taken action on that? I'm assuming we did. I'm not supervisor. Yeah. Do you know what their timeline is?
So there wasn't any communication with staff. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't.
Staff like to have communication with them. I mean, this is still a draft, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, we could recommend that staff talk to staff. Yeah.
This, I mean, looked at this, but I didn't look at this, if you will. So I didn't know how thorough. They did have a member on the Crossroads team, but one, where most of the other municipalities had two. I don't know what dictated that, but and they are a part of along with the city and and the county. Yeah, I was just wondering how quick we actually need to act on this, and if more discussion would be appropriate. I don't know
I
what
think the
they're.
comment at the top of the second page is very appropriate too, about the eastern boundary. That would be good feedback as well.
That would be right after our next meeting. Yeah, I think the 8th, I think. Yeah. Well, we could, but then when do the supervisors meet? They're- So,
I mean, I think you make good comments, Colin, and I think asking to sit down and have a review with their staff, and maybe the consultant, just to, particularly things along the border at Bridgeport. Try to find out why Bridgeport Crossroads wasn't mentioned more significantly. Certainly an impact in the township from that project.
well, there was good planning and cooperation to do the plan, and I think any implementation with certain aspects of that needs to be communicated and coordinated as far as any application for funding, any specific improvements. If we aren't doing it together, it would not be effective or appropriate to do a trail or part of a road or sidewalk or whatever it may be that comes out of that plan. You don't want to stop the municipal boundary, it would be inefficient. It needs to be continued communication and coordination on implementing that plan. So I think the
Maybe you could report back to us at the next meeting if you had conversations.
yeah, if you would. I don't know if we need a motion on this. If not, I think we're in agreement with those items included, that it's acceptable to move it forward to meet their April deadline. And give the supervisors an opportunity to have our comments. So that's new business. We have briefing items.
So one of the access to the department and the second one is the facility and some improvements as well as parking.
Yeah, I had a little trouble placing it, but this lightly gray area is what this plan is proposing, is to put this loop in here. Yeah. So this is back off of Greenland Drive, so I had trouble first locating this without, yeah, where on the site it was. Yeah. And then this asphalt walkway, is that all proposed new?
That is, there was a fire.
Okay. This property is residential then? On the other side of theirs, as well as on the other side of Greenland's all residential. Okay. We'll look for those in the next meeting or two or three, depending on their. Next and last item, I'm guessing, thank you for your patience, is the mixed-use zone text amendment for reference to the square at Bridgeport, 1625 Old Floyd Pike. No, this is at the entrance off of Old Philly Pike into Hack.
Correct.
And the property would be the bank to the left. And is the bank closed or is the bank still operating?
It's temporarily closed right
Right,
now,
okay.
which is part of the reason for our discussion.
So there's the bank to the left of that entrance drive. And behind that is what they would talk to in the letter, a 4-story building. So maybe I'll let you.
Sure. Good evening, I'm Claudia Shank. Good evening, I'm Claudia Shank. I'm an attorney with McNeese, Wallace & Nurick, and I'm here this evening on behalf of Campus Shops LP. I'm joined by Jay and Scott Provenzo, who are representatives of the applicant. So as your chairman indicated, the property that we're here to discuss this evening is 1625 Old Philadelphia Pike, roughly 2.5 acres. It's mixed use zoning. It is currently improved with the bank pad site that was referenced, which is temporarily closed. It's a bank with drive-through facilities, as well as a 4-story mixed-use building that's known as the Square at Bridgeport. The first floor of that building is designed to be retail office space, and the upper 3 floors are residential. We're here this evening to discuss a potential text amendment with the Planning Commission. We haven't formally submitted anything to the township yet. We did have an informal meeting with Colin and Tara just to talk about some of our ideas. But really what we're looking for is some greater flexibility, particularly with respect to the retail space on the first floor of the residential building, but also with regard to the potential future redevelopment of the bank pad site. Obviously, with the decline of retail that we've all seen over the course of the last couple of years with COVID, it's been very difficult to lease space within the first floor of that building, in particularly for the types of uses that are permitted in the mixed-use zoning district. If you look through the permitted uses, there's a lot of larger scale uses that are permitted: a grocery store, a medical or dental clinic, dry cleaner, a daycare, et cetera. And there are some smaller scale uses as well. But it has been challenging to lease that space. And Jay can talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but he's been actively working at that for a number of years without a lot of success. Currently, they do have a personal training facility, a personal service facility in there, a gym type use. But it has been challenging. The other challenge obviously is associated with the bank pad site. That is actually a pre-existing non-conforming use. A financial institution is not permitted in the mixed use zoning district. It was permitted under the prior zoning. So as a result of these limitations and the challenge with leasing the space, we came in and talked to staff about a number of different ideas that we have for how the space could be better utilized. that would require amendments to the zoning ordinance. And we just wanted to present some of those to you this evening and seek your feedback on those potential ideas for text amendments. So really the use that was the catalyst for this discussion was a self-storage use, as I indicated in my letter. We're familiar with other projects, in particular other mixed-use residential projects that have converted basically the first floor of the building into a self-storage use. Obviously, it'd be available to the tenants that reside on the upper floors in the building, but it wouldn't necessarily just be limited to them. So not really an accessory to the apartment use, but essentially its own separate use. This would be a service that would be entered through a single exterior door. And basically you'd access the units down corridors. So it's not as if there would be, garage door loading spaces lining the outside of the building. To give you a little bit of a feel for the use, and maybe some smaller units. I know there are tenants within the building who have a need to store bicycles, have a need to store, extra furniture and things like that that they may have, and this would provide an opportunity for them to do that. It would be a key swipe system to get in and out of the self-storage portion of the building. And what we had proposed in discussion with staff is that there would be a size limitation perhaps on this if it were to be permitted in the mixed use district. We had talked about a maximum of 10,000 square feet. Really, we want to emphasize that the product that we're talking about here would be very different from the traditional self-storage that the zoning ordinance really is designed to regulate, that you see most places being the drive-up self-storage. We do think this would be a nice complement to the residential use and would allow us to productively use that first floor of the building. So that really was the catalyst for the amendment. In discussion with staff, we talked about some other potential uses that we think would make sense to include. Staff had mentioned specifically making financial institutions a permitted use because, again, we currently have that issue with the bank on the property being non-conforming. And obviously, it's preferred that we not have non-conforming uses within the district. We also talked about basically commercial recreation use, like a gym. As I previously indicated, there is a gym like use on the property now. It's really more of a personal training facility, but the way the regulations are currently written, a larger scale gymnasium that would be, open. This current service is a by appointment only service that would have more expanded hours of operations for people to come and go freely. That wouldn't be permitted on the property. And again, we think that would have a nice fit, nice tie in with the residential use. So that was another use that we wanted to discuss. And then finally, we did want to broach the idea of permitting drive-through facilities, not just in connection with financial institutions, but also in connection with restaurants and retail bakery type uses. And again, this is looking forward at potentially redeveloping that pad site. What could go there besides a bank? We are not seeing as many bank facilities being constructed post-COVID. So there's a question, will we be able to find another tenant there, or would it maybe be a better fit for some kind of a quick service restaurant or a cafe or something along those lines. So again, these are all ideas really for purposes of discussion, and we're interested in hearing the feedback from the commission this evening before we would move forward with submitting something formally. But really, the bottom line is there is a need for some additional flexibility. We've tried for a long period of time to lease this space, and just in the post-COVID world that we're living in, some of the realities have changed in terms of this smaller scale neighborhood retail, if you will. So I'm going to ask Jay Provenzo to come forward at this point and just talk a little bit about his ideas for the future development of the site and some of the challenges he's had with leasing the space.
Jay Provenzo with Campus Shops. We're the developers. Going back a couple of years ago, we came to see you guys with an idea of mixed use residential over retail concept to take advantage of the site that was originally designed back in 2005, I think, is when this was done. Around that time, Mr. Redcape put a bank in. And then there was a proposal for a mixed use building, multi-purpose gym, library, and some office for the Hack campus. Of course, when Hack proceeded to purchase their property, they did not buy, they opted out of purchasing this, what was known as Lot 1. So we had the idea of taking that bank and adding this mixed-use building behind it. It's for the most part, the residential piece, as you guys are aware, pretty much throughout the county, in our market especially, has been very well. We're fully leased up. And as part of that lease up, we had some people ask us, hey, do you have any storage? What can we do with our stuff? I'm amazed at how much people can fit in 750 square feet. But there are boxes lined our hallways on moving days that show they can fit quite a bit. So that started a discussion with Claudia about, could we do some type of self-storage down there? I believe it is permitted to the extent that it's just an accessory use for our residents. But of course, that's a very hard thing to fit out for 15 or 20 or 30 people as part of the building without having some other uses. Certainly not everybody's going to use it. So we started to look at the idea. Claudia mentioned the facility that is in Mountville. One of our partners, one of the guys we do a lot of business with, they manage storage facilities, and they took about 3,500 square feet in Mountville that was retail and turned it into self-storage, and it's been doing really well. Key access. So our idea here is to take a portion of the building potentially, and I think Claudia's going to share some pictures with you to give you an idea of what we're looking at. We're looking at taking an area of the building. Our building footprint is about 11,000 feet. Claudia mentioned we have Powertrain as one of our tenants there. That leaves about 9,000 and change. We're looking at taking a portion of that building and developing it into storage units. As you can see from the photos in front of you, these are small, usually 5 by 10, maybe 8 by 10, 10 by 10, 10 by 12. They're not real big. The focus would, of course, be to have narrow hallways to kind of but to try and convince people. Discourage is the right word. Moving large things, certainly flammables, those type of stuff would all be prohibited inside the building. But it would be under key access. What that would look like at this point, we're not quite sure. We can go numerous ways. We can go to an access kiosk where it will take your picture when you come in, so that who's coming and going out of the building. Our partner mentioned the possibility of doing cameras, just so we have a good idea of what's happening, making sure people aren't moving stuff in or hanging out there longer than they have to. So we've explored that possibility. There's still a lot to do there, but certainly the flexibility it would be appreciated. One of the benefits to this, and in the mixed use, with the mixed use concept, one of the things that we had spoken about before is parking. I know there's a great deal of parking at the previous project discussed. Self-storage unit, you don't need a lot of parking. Based on talking to the self-storage guys, are telling me we're looking at probably 5 trips or less per week. So I'll round up to 10. Very short term, you're not going to need the parking. So certainly that helps us there. We do have, not quite sure the amount of parking between all the facilities, but we do have an ample amount of parking. Of course, with COVID, that's kept some people in their apartments a little longer. They're not driving to work as often. So certainly an opportunity to reduce some of the parking, or at least reduce the demand on the parking. So other spaces would be important. Let's see here. That's really all I can say about the apartment or the self-storage piece. Now, if I can switch over to the retail side of things. We've been at this 2 years, 2+ years. In that time, we've had inquiries from your Anytime Fitnesses, your F45 Fitnesses. They've all come into the county, and a lot of them have already exited the county or went out of business. enclosed. We've had increase from coffee shops, hair, nails, places like that. We've had the not so excitable places, vape shops, and things like tattoo parlor, which are actually de-restricted from HAC from when they developed that site, so we can't do those anyway. We've also had restaurants. I have a list here for you. Accounting firm, small office. We had like small bakery type uses, but they were looking for drive-through, which I know, I think you mentioned is something that if we could backfill the bank, would not be a possibility at this moment. We've also had beer. I think we're about beer, which again, being on top of the campus or next to the campus, the beer shop is a restricted use. So we can do that anyway. So we've had some of these different attempts to lease the office, but of course, as you start to look around, we did a quick search. There are 33 spaces similar to ours inside the eastern part of Lancaster at some locations such as the East Town Center, which is on Lincoln Highway, and there's probably 4 or 5 on Old Philadelphia Pike as well. So we start to look at all those things, we put them all together and say, you know what? Retail is probably a far way out for this site. So what else can we do? What else can we do to use it? We have a bank that is closed, temporarily closed. They have a lease for 2 more years with us. And what they're going to do, about told us, we had some conversation. So we're just starting to look out to the future here to see how we can better utilize the site. What else? Is there anything else you want to do?
Soliciting your feedback, so we're interested in your thoughts on proposals that we've discussed.
The other thing I would add, Claudia, as we were talking through this is, as you look through the ordinance, is there anything that we didn't mention that we should consider if we go through the text amendment that would be beneficial in the mixed use zone?
Have it. I take a look at the, I mentioned earlier, the Bridgeport Transportation Management Plan. And some of the review, through that review process, preparing that, did talk about mixed use and having first floor business, making it a more walkable, livable area in Bridgeport, both on Old Philly and Lincoln Highway, from that 5 road intersection, which you're just north of, or excuse me, east of. Yeah. So I take a look at that and see if how what you're proposing fits with recommendations in there. And that's just at the planning, early planning stages at this point. The self-storage seems to make sense because of the tenants above. I think you need to be specific. You made some reference to size, access, things of that nature. I think that's critical to limit it.
And the limitations, I think, are very necessary.
Yeah, I think those are critical on when you get down to the details. I think it can work. Beyond that, as far as you managing it, you do have residents that live there. They probably aren't going to want people coming in the middle of the night, banging a sofa and chairs and tables and whatnot, put in this, whatever would fit in their storage when they're hopefully sleeping. So you may lose tenants, but anyway, that's part of your agreement if you get to the point of doing that. But it's, to me, it seems to make sense for that. And I don't know if how large of an area, I don't know if there'd be a limitation as to the size, not of just the unit, but the area. Now you talk 10,000 square feet here. I don't know how that compares to what space is available. And that first floor is divided now into,
Currently, the first floor is open. It can be divided up to 7 spaces, which was the design. We had it spaces roughly 1,700 to 1,900 square feet. There are 30 units.
And could you assign like each, just to think about the track of people, could you assign a storage unit to each tenant to just have that targets and get your storage? If that's that. What do you keep those people interested in that in the second and third floor?
I think we would have a decent capture rate. We work with Boyd Wilson. They're pretty well known around here for property management, and they keep us pretty well informed. And there has been requests for storage, whether it be for bikes. Bikes are a big one. I see people going up and down the elevator with their bikes. Certainly, they don't want them outside, but a place like that for the residents would be ideal.
I think the idea would be to offer it as an additional service, but not so required, because you know the rent is already very high in the county. So I think, some people could purchase their option without.
So from my perspective, zoning changes in that area are challenging now because of Bridgeport. So you make a zoning change now, it becomes a permitted use. And then Bridgeport plan moves forward, becomes more walkable. First floor, I get that your first floor retail space doesn't work because of where it's located.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not visible, to be honest,
Correct.
unless you're driving west on Old Philadelphia Pike. But with some of the proposed changes to the Bridgeport plan, that can become a major throughway to wrap around to Pitney Road in exchange for the 5-point intersection we have now. So I do think looking at that's really important. I mean, even if you could do the self-storage piece in the rear of the first floor space and keep frontage available for retail and other types of walkable uses that could be possible in the future. I don't discount the space, but I don't like to see dead space either on the first floor.
Sure.
So if Bridgeport plan goes into place, you've got dead space if that first floor is all stored. Just, it doesn't look good, to be honest. The building's fine, but I mean, just seeing, solid white without any activity from a walkability standpoint doesn't make sense. So just, I think taking the advice of looking at that plan really closely and see what it's talking about and what its proposed uses are so that you would have something compatible. The challenge is that plan is probably 5-10 years out.
Correct.
So I understand that challenge for you.
And you said potentially 7 units. And what is the overall square footage of that first floor?
Yeah, the overall square footage is about 11,000 square feet. 1,900 roughly.
How many storage units do you see in there?
Probably somewhere in the tune of 50 to 60. And that's not going to be the entire space. If we did, it would be we would look into a portion of the building initially. I don't think we do the whole thing. Certainly retail pays better than storage units when you have it. Right now, our challenge is the cost to fit out space and do all these things. One of the challenges. There's plenty of space at one of the higher rent districts that they're discounting to comparable values that we just can't do. One. Number two, the traffic at those locations is significantly better. You could be at East Town Mall or you could be at Hack. Certainly Hack hasn't helped us being having students there for 2 years or a year and a half. You see that parking lot empty? It's definitely empty and has been as a prospective retail tenant. That's one of the pieces I think in that market there that you're looking at. It's how many students are coming over Hack, along with the amount of traffic coming through that road. So you guys have done the study of the busiest intersections at that 5-way in the county.
Does that site allow you to do a drive-through around the back or somehow?
It does not. When we did the building, we weren't permitted to do drive-through. So we essentially maximized the depth of the building.
When are you at, building or the road around town?
No, I'm asking the building itself, if you had a small bakery on the end that wanted to drive through.
If we had a bakery, about the best we could do there is if we had a bakery on the end, we could do a walk-up window. We finished that area. We made sure we met accessibility around the building at that point for that specific reason. In the event that we could do some type of walk-up, we have the ability to do it, knowing that we could do a drive-through.
You in the bank site?
We do. It's all in one parcel.
So that's where you're looking for the drive-through piece to be
Correct.
permitted for restaurant use or whatever.
Correct.
The challenge, Randy spoke, some of it is a text amendment to the mixed use is not just this site, it's township wide.
Mhm.
So from the bigger perspective, we have to look at what this means. You know, going with the bank, which is closed, which is, as you said, an existing non-conforming use. For us, it may be more appropriate for you to come in for a new, less non-conforming use because restaurant and bakery are permitted and mixed use, just the drive-through is not. Correct. So it would be a matter of having a primary use that is acceptable, but a drive-through that's there. So making, you know, I like to see a reuse of buildings as opposed to tearing down and removing them.
And that bank actually was, when Union Community built it, was their coffee shop / bank.
Yeah.
They tried it there and in Hempfield on Centerville Road. I think the one on Centerville Road may have lasted slightly longer. I know that bank's still in operation, but it pretty much got rid of the coffee component in a couple of years.
Well, you know, the whole last couple of years, that coffee shop would be probably fine for the students if they weren't virtual. Or
Yeah.
Zooming, yeah. They
We
were on
for-
campus, they would get up late and zoom through there and grab their coffee and go to class, but that's,
Well, when leading up to this point, we had a lot of meetings with HAC. Of course, they put the right turn lane in for us. And we were all on the same page, you know, average age, 26 years old of a HAC student, a little bit of disposable income. Obviously, additional services, we were at meetings. We were at events with the students. And of course, what's one of the things probably came up in the Bridgeport study too. Everybody wants to see more restaurants, more food options. The challenge today is, you know, we go to Pasquale's a lot, there's no way to work. We've had coffee shops inquire, and one of them they told me, I like the location, but I can't find a manager and I can't find people to staff it. My other locations, we're having that issue now, so I can expand, I want to expand, but I can't have the capacity to expand. I don't have people. I think we're seeing a lot of that. That seems to be a common thread with people we talk to is even if we proceed forward with something, where are we going to find the people and will it be able to operate? And we can put in a bakery that might do very well, but if they can be open every day because of staffing issues or other things, it would really help. So.
Well, the restaurant and bakery uses are permitted in this district. So it's just the addition of the drive-through. And really, again, I think this is sort of a pre-COVID, post-COVID thing. You're seeing a lot more places that are offering drive-through service anymore because people don't want to go in places. You've also got moms like me that don't want to take their kids out of the car and will do anything to be able to drive through. So, and I think with all the uses that we're discussing, you know, I understand the comment that this applies not only to our property and certainly, you know, the seriousness that with which you have to consider a text amendment. But I do think the uses we're discussing really fit within sort of the confines of what the mixed use district is meant to be in terms of sort of marrying residential and non-residential development together.
The only complicating part for me again is the Bridgeport study.
Okay.
So really looking at redoing Bridgeport as a village, that's a challenge that I'd have to get through on a text amendment that would allow something that today makes sense in a regular mixed use district, but if that becomes a village district, not so much.
Just another option is as opposed to the storage, the self-storage being primary use, seeing that there is housing above, potentially the thought of as an accessory use that a certain percentage would be reserved for those tenants. In a sense, it would be an accessory use because it seems today a lot of people have more than they can store. And some people there, well, those are rentals, I assume. It's not condo, it's a rental. And it may be tweeners that they're in between here and there. I don't know what your tenants are, if they're there for 6 months, a year, or 5 years. Well, it hasn't been 5 years, but it hasn't been that long. But if you've had some there since the beginning, if they stayed, or if they're just transient, if they're passing through until they get into a home or this or that, but they may have storage needs, and that might be a more plausible than accessory use for a percentage of it, and then some potentially for other use, as opposed to asking as a primary use. I don't know if you can take a look at that. You've seen more what the market will bear than we have, and you may have the numbers to justify a variation, if you will, for that. And somewhat going with, it may be unappealing to some because of the cost that it would be tacked on, but it may be appealing to those that want it, depending on what their needs are.
Find them mostly tax students in there, or is it just a mixed demographic? Or?
No, I don't know that we have any tax students, based on the market rents. We have professional, we have a lot of professional people. We have some people who, a lot of people who work out. We have pretty much all different reasons.
Yeah, but
There's no tax students. No, I don't think there's any students. But other than that, a lot of them are at $1,800 a month. Choosing. So we'll have so the challenge is to trigger. They want to have just a lot. So from the tenant standpoint, that side is pretty strong. You have really tenants up there for the place. Awesome. But we're going to figure out what we can help that. And
It's a convenient location for access to Route 30, the downtown Lancaster. It's, other than the immediate Bridgeport interchange there, if you will. Not interchange, but that's just traffic situation. But to the west of your property, the vacant between your building and Weiss, there's that vacant lot. I don't know what that's going to be, and that could be a plus to
I think
Currently-
that would be part of your bridge program, correct? Traffic
Yeah,
plan for that area. So, certainly connection wise.
the, we talked largely about the self-storage, but commercial recreation use, what is? But currently municipal recreation use is allowed and what is the private or I forget. the term.
Personal service facility.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, and I think when we got into discussions with the township regarding the existing personal service or gym type use that's there now, I think we all sort of felt that it was perhaps an oversight that it wasn't included in the first place. So I think the hope was in coming back and doing this text amendment, we could add it in. I mean, it's a natural fit with a mixed use zoning district. And there's been a lot of interest from gym type uses that,
so what's there now would be considered commercial?
I mean, that one's, we've technically considered a personal service facility because it's by appointment only and so forth. So it's a little bit different from like your Planet Fitness, which obviously that would be a larger scale use that would fit in there. But it's different from folks just coming and going. You know, you have to schedule an appointment to come in for personal training. So it would be nice to be able to have the flexibility to have a more traditional gym there if there was interest.
So that existing would be limited to expand if- unless commercial was added.
I think that's fair to say.
Potentially could expand.
Yeah.
They had. I believe they did have some individuals most of their stuff is employment based.
Yeah, I kind of look at the retail bakery. Drive-through would probably be nice, but I'm looking at that more like a Rita's, which is not a drive-through. And if you've ever been down the road in the summer, they may have 30 people deep, you know, and it's parked, so it would entail more parking, but the bakery wouldn't get, I don't think the volume that Rita's does at prime hours, but I think the walk to, I understand yours with the kids in the car, but I also like to get people out of the car. And if you want a gym, you know, well, you know, you can go to the gym and work out and then go get a donut, you know, or get the donut and then say, "Gee, I got to go to the gym." But so, yeah,
And there aren't really opportunities for us to do drive-throughs, as Jay mentioned, around the existing building, but I think we're more thinking again of backfilling that bank space and what's going to be practical to go in there. And there are already drive-through facilities there, so it would be nice to be able to, you know, expand into some restaurant or bakery type uses, coffee shop type uses at that location. Of course, drive-throughs and coffee shops are becoming increasingly common anymore. I'm not sure whether you would consider that a restaurant or a bakery, but
well, that, yeah, and it would cover all mixed use zones in the township, but you have an existing non-conforming. It's a matter of the timing, though, if you would come in and ask to take that non-conforming use and change it to more desirable non-conforming use. You know, maybe the way it could go for the township, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Whether making it an open door for any mixed use to allow that. It's a challenge to foresee the crystal ball, what impact that would have in other areas. I don't know if we've given you a lot of help or a little, but I think with the storage, I think, size and access to details would be critical. And then, justification you may have. That how it would be accessed and limitation. I don't know if I heard you right. You said the square footage on that first floor is the total of 11,000?
11,000.
And you were saying 10 here for a maximum for storage, which would
Correct.
use everything but 1,000?
Well, we currently have some at least, but the idea was we have to limit, we had in our conversation with yeah, one of the things we talked about is that it's going to be about 10,000. When you look at some of these facilities, they're doing these in other parts. We're not talking all or Kmart places that are purpose. But that aspect is smaller than with some storage. They're primarily that was kind of that number. I'm not sure how many we have. The one that we looked at is
I don't know how you do it. Maybe that seems, I'd still like to see some businesses on the first floor with the mixed use. I don't know if a percentage of the available space, instead of putting a square footage, but a percentage of what's available might be helpful. That you would limit it to a maximum percentage of the available first floor square footage that could be used for storage. That's just me talking. I don't know where the rest are. But,
Sure.
yeah. So
I mean, generally, is there any strong feelings against the bank or the gym use? So the concerns would more be in terms of the self-storage, making sure it's sufficiently limited so as not to prohibit future development. And then in terms of the drive-through would be not necessarily that there's from this site, how's it going to impact other sites in the township if that were to occur?
yeah. I mean, the bank hasn't been that active, so we haven't had, I don't know of any traffic issues there with the drive-through now, but I
Right.
don't know if that would change.
Sure.
the bank is not stacked with ones.
Any more comments?
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your feedback.
Thank you. Item 9, announcements. None? I'm sure if you said none or one. Zero, thank you. And on here, thank you for your, with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Adjourn.
Yeah.
Motion from Jerry. Do I have a second? Second. Jason, all those in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Thank you.